Welcome into the Men Are Forged podcast. I'm your host, Cartwright Morris. Through this podcast and through my coaching services as well as my men's mastermind, I help high performers pursue a higher quality of life. This is my life mission, to help men step into who they're called to be and be a more well-rounded and intentional man in their business, in their family, and in their community. If that interests you, you can go to menarforged.com to find out more information about my high-performance coaching, as well as some of the other services I provide. That's menarforged.com.
Hey guys, Tim Williams here, the host of the Thrivehood podcast. Thrivehood is a relevant life roadmap for boys and young men who want to thrive as they mature boldly into manhood. I'll be bringing you a dose of just good old seasoned wisdom and some offbeat humor to a variety of topics that'll both challenge and motivate you to become the best version of yourself. Check it out at thrivehoodpodcast.com.
All right. Well, welcome to Men Are Forged podcast. I'm excited to have my guest today, Dai Manuel. Man, it's great to have you.
Cartwright, it's awesome to be here. It's like, before we hit record, I know we were catching up there, and this has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
all my fault too.
Building.
I know. I don't know. I lost count how many times I had to reschedule with you, but I know it was more times than I care to admit. So, but I'm just so glad to be here, and thank you for creating a platform for these conversations to happen. Because I'll tell you, you're chatting about men, especially men in their 20s, right? And it's a very interesting time in our lives in our 20s. And when I think back, because that was 20 years ago for me, right? I'm 45 now, but if I went back 20 years ago, oh man, if I could tap into these types of conversations, be a fly on the wall to hear some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Life probably would have gone differently, Now, I don't have any regret. My life has gone the way it's gone, and I've learned along the steps. There's been a lot of hard stuff. It's my life. I got no problem with that. But at times, having good mentorship would have been really valuable. So anyways, I just want to say thank you, for the opportunity to be here, but also thank you for putting this out to the world.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm like I said, I'm trying to serve the person I used to be.
Yes.
So,
love that.
Yeah. So I guess you just kind of led me in there. So what, I love to kind of think through, this is what I try to help my listeners really engage with their own personal story of what they learned and what from their own life. And so really you growing up, what was maybe something that really stuck out from your upbringing that you really think about in your adulthood? Well,
I'm going to give you the real quick synopsis, and we'll pick what part we want to talk about, because there's, obviously 45 laps around the sun. I've done a couple things, I've lived through some pretty hard stuff, but we all have, again, my story isn't unique. Well, it's uniquely my own, but a lot of the circumstances I've worked through are common circumstances that many of us have worked through, especially men. Right. And again, full disclosure, I'm a man who identifies as a man. Okay. So when I'm using language and when I'm sharing my story, please recognize it's from that perspective. Okay. And that's it. All I can speak about is what I've experienced from my perspective. And because I do have a 19-year-old daughter that's very adamant about pronoun usage and gender fluidity. And so I'm trying to learn. Okay. I'm trying to learn because you still can learn. Right. So, from 9 to 14, I was morbidly obese. I was a big kid, really big kid. Went through some changes at 15, got to a place where I was more afraid of not changing than changing. Wow. It's funny how we get to that place, don't we? It's like, I'm more afraid if I stay as I am right now, I know life isn't going to get better. It's going to get harder. So maybe I should make a change. And so that was my first time really encountering that kind of a thing. And anyways, fast forward 20 months later, made some big shifts and transformations. And, but unfortunately, my social anxiety, my depression, my overwhelm with life and all the cliches that come with somebody in that state of unhealth, I was living. And even though as I was making these physical changes, I wasn't making the internal changes. And I learned early on that if I drank, I could be somebody else.
Yeah.
and a lot of those inhibitions would go away. My social anxiety would go away, and I could open up and I could be somebody very different. And that started to become somebody that not only did I believe that people around me preferred hanging out with, but I actually got to a place thinking that that's the person that was of more value than I was.
Yeah. Which
is really weird when you think about it. Because, I mean, when I reflect on it, my nickname was Fun Guy Dai, Fun Guy Dai. I was a great drinker. I was great at it. I was a lot of fun. I'd go to conferences for my business and we work in deals with these suppliers, and they'd be like, okay, well, we're done the deal now. Where are you going tonight? More importantly, where are you hanging out tonight, Dai? We want to be there. I had this reputation.
Yeah.
And it's funny, in the heat of it, especially late 20s, early 30s, I was proud of that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because my identity was attached to that, And anyways, 20s got, met my wife, had a couple kids. I have 2 daughters now. They're now 17 and 19. And but the business that I was fortunate to co-found was a fitness equipment business, fitness equipment, supplies, supplements, apparel, to B2B and to consumers. So brick and mortar retail operation. So we had 8 stores and a couple B2B enterprises and, manufacturing overseas. Like really, I mean, I did it for 17 years, a long time.
Wow.
And lots of highs and lows, learned a lot, but got to a place where life was just not manageable anymore. And, in my early 30s, and that's when my drinking really got out of control. And, I made a big change, a really big change. And we'll probably want to unpack that in a second, but I'll just sort of finish the story and then we'll just pick where do we want to leap off to, because I know people are thinking like, okay, well, where are we going with this? Right. And I'm already thinking, where am I going with this? Okay. So in my early 30s, I made a big change. And actually I did a TEDx talk last year and I share about that story, about where I made this pinnacle. I reached a pinnacle where I realized I had to make a change again, because I was more afraid if I didn't make the change, I was going to lose my family.
Yeah.
My kids, my wife, and my business. And it's this very scary place, and it's a very real place a lot of us will get to sometimes. And the thing that we often forget, which I forgot, I was always thinking that, it's somebody else's fault I'm here. It's not my fault.
Yeah.
These circumstances are not my fault, my creation. No, this is your fault, that person's fault, and the government's fault. And you know what I mean? I was really good at just pointing fingers, but never taking ownership. And anyway, so made some changes again, which eventually led me to completely doing a 180 with my life.
Yeah.
Because rather than being so focused on the professional development, I said, well, what about if I want to just develop myself as a person, as a human, as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a business owner, really started to get clear with who do I want to be? And then that put in motion. I left my career, pulled the kids out of school. A few months after that, my wife quit her job too. And we gave away all our stuff. And we started traveling.
Wow.
And traveled for about 5 years, and 2.5 years we lived in Bali, Indonesia. And before the pandemic, we moved back to Vancouver, and kids are finishing school here, and life is doing what we're doing. But okay, so I just gave you almost basically like a 30-year in about 4 minutes. So
yeah, that was great. That was great. I think
where do you want to go first? There we go. But lots to talk about. But obviously, I want to focus on the areas that you feel. What do people need to hear right now? Where are people struggling right now? Because trust me, I am either struggling and working through it right now, or it's something I have already worked through. That's all I can say.
So I've got a couple of questions off of that. One is, well, I guess maybe more the macro version of it, or even just your own personal. It's like, why as men do we the catalyst to change always has to be what I'm about to lose if I keep doing what I'm doing, and not what do I gain?
It's fear. It's amazing how motivating fear can be.
Yeah.
Which is weird, right? Because it's a rather negative emotion. Yeah. I mean, it's not like we wake up in the morning like, man, I really want to feel scared today. Man, you know what? I don't have enough in my life? Fear. It's like, no, fear does tend to motivate us, either because we want to run away from it, or it's just a reminder that, I'm really uncomfortable and I'm not clear on where I'm going, from a directional standpoint with life. Because, why do we set goals Goals just give us direction.
Yeah.
It's a result that we hope to achieve. And usually there's some sort of emotional connection or release when we achieve it. But it's just simply a mile marker on our life's journey. I mean, that's all it is. A goal is that. It's just a life marker, right? It's just like, oh, there's another milestone on this road. Like, whoa, I accomplished this. Great. But at least you've got direction. When we don't have direction, well, we lack confidence, right? We lack vision. And it can be a very scary place when we feel like we're just drifting or floating.
Right.
Because often there's also lack of purpose and meaning. And when we don't have a purpose and we don't feel connected to our life and why we get up every morning, we really get good at procrastinating by doing other things that really, in the whole scheme of life, provide very little value to ourselves, nor to the people that we surround ourselves with.
Yeah.
And yet it becomes our normal. It becomes our life.
Yeah.
Case in point, I got to a place where I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't having fun with life anymore, and I was just going through the motion, doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing and feeling very unhappy.
Yeah.
And to be fair, unfulfilled. And as such, because there's this huge chasm there that I felt like couldn't be filled, what would I do? I would drink so I didn't have to think about it. Give myself a little bit of reprieve, and sometimes that would lead to certain drug use, which would also lead me to doing things that was so outside of my character, which made me feel tremendous guilt and shame and self-blame, which would often at times, I'm feeling more anxious again. Oh, I should probably have another drink. And, and it's just this vicious downward spiral that we sometimes find ourselves falling down. And us as men, it's weird because sometimes, and I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes, especially in my situation, that was what was normal to me because it was also what was role modeled based on my association.
Yeah.
I look at who I was hanging out with. That's what everybody was doing. So like, how am I supposed to know there's even a different route or a different way of doing things when that's all I watch my friends do? And I think this is just normal. This is just the way it is, but deep down, I knew that this wasn't right. I wasn't feeling good.
Yeah.
I was feeling afraid. I was feeling fearful about myself. And then all of a sudden you get to that place where it's like, oh, this fear, it's not just in my head. This is a reality.
Yeah.
And if I keep doing this, there's some clear repercussions that I have to be prepared to accept.
Yes.
Or we do something else. Right. I like to, it might sound overly simplistic to say this, but when you find yourself in this situation, which I'm sure anybody that's listening or watching this, I'm sure you found yourself in a similar situation at some point in your life. And yet you're still here. You did get through it. You can reflect back on that. Yeah. But you can reflect back on that situation and think about it and look at it from who you are now and try to reframe it. What can you learn from that past experience?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's so powerful. Yeah.
And we do this, but I don't think we really give ourselves a lot of space to do it more than just an afterthought. You know what I mean? It's creating that intentional time to do this kind of a work. And to be fair, it wasn't until I made some serious commitments, and especially I made a commitment to go 1 year without drinking, which from the age of 17 to the age of 32, those 15 years, the longest stint I ever did without having an alcoholic beverage was a month. Because I did some like sober January or something like that. I don't remember what it was exactly, but I remember that was the longest stint I'd ever done without having a drink. It was like 30 days. And so just to put it in perspective, I made a commitment to my family, more importantly to myself, 1 year without drinking.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Yeah, I bet.
Full disclosure, man. Anybody listen to this, it was hard because there's probably guys thinking, oh, I could probably do that. And I'm like, oh, if it depends. Like if it becomes a regular habit or a ritual in your life, and you're trying to go cold turkey and eliminate it entirely, it's tough. It's just hard.
Yeah. There's something you said that I really think is interesting, and maybe this is why we escape to alcohol addiction, pornography, whatever, or the midlife crisis is like you used the word procrastination. And to me, it's procrastinating that big question you said is, who do I want to be?
Yeah.
And what led you to actually really stop and do that? What was the kind of the hard quitting your job, all that? Today's episode is brought to you by Thrive Marriage Lab. If you want your marriage to thrive, this is a great opportunity to you, because strong marriages are the bedrock of strong churches, organization, families, and community. This is a 12-month pathway for any of you that are looking to really have weekly engagement with experienced marriage counselors, not just one, but many. So go to restory.life/thrive to get on the waiting list for this great program that starts in April. That's restory.life/thrive. And make sure you put the word Forge in the promo code to receive a discount on your monthly fee. Now, back to the episode.
Well, so once like the alcohol consumption just got to a place where it was so normal for me, but it wasn't normal for my wife.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like she wasn't willing to accept that as my normal because she fell in love with a certain man. She fell in love with me and the person I was and the ambition that I had, but also, when we first start to date that significant person in our life, right? That person that we might be ready to commit our entire life being with, there are certain promises that are said and not said.
Yeah.
Like especially the stuff that we say, but just through our actions. And so she saw in me not only the person that I was and the person that I was expressing I wanted to be through my actions, but also, she was holding me accountable to some of those commitments.
Yeah.
Because she always saw the potential in me that even on my darkest days, I couldn't see in myself. So she was a real powerful mirror for me in that respect. She is. And, and I hope everyone that has that significant partner in their life has something similar. That person that reminds you of the person that you want to be and you have the potential of being. Bringing out the best in us, And so that as sort of the with that awareness, and now that I've shared that, when I fast forward to that time when I was 32, almost 33, things were not going very well. I was drinking a lot more frequently. I was drinking alone at times. It was just so normal, and often I'd go out with my friends. They'd invite me to go watch UFC, go play a round of golf, and it just would always inevitably turn into a lot more than what it was intended to be. Because that was my normal. That's what we did. Yeah. And then my wife sat me down one day and I remember we were having that conversation. She was at her wit's end and she wanted to have a conversation. What it would be like to co-parent our kids? What would life look like for us to separate, have a different, kids live with her, see me occasionally. Because to be fair, she was like, this is not an environment I want to raise our kids in anymore. And she asked me a question as I'm trying to plead my case, right? I'm trying to, that's what we do. Get into that place. Yeah, I'm afraid now, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, my family, I'm going to lose my family. Like, holy smokes. And I had nothing I could say to defend myself. And that's when I knew, what? There's some challenges here that I really got to sober up and get aware of because she's right.
Yeah.
And she asked me a question. And now people that are listening to this is the question. This is the question.
Give me my pen real quick.
All right. She says, Dai, are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters? Well, yeah, exactly. Right. Drop the mic, punch me in the nose and kick me between the legs at the same time. It was like instant. Yeah. There was this overwhelming feeling of like all the air was sucked out of me. Right. And I knew she was right. I was not. Like, to be fair, I actually had a vision. It was like, man, if the person that I was at that time, 13 years ago, had I showed up on my doorstep and knocked on the door and, showed up there saying, hey, I'm here to, date your daughters or to get to know your daughters better. Like, I wouldn't let them across the threshold. I'd be like, hey, you're out of here, buddy. Like, I'm not letting you in here, but yeah, that's who I was saying to them. This is what a man is. This is what a husband is. This is what a business owner is. This is what a community leader is. I was just saying, this is it. I was the measuring stick through which they were comparing other men. And man, did I set the bar low, I can own this right now. 13 years ago was a lot more raw and real, and the conversation would be very different. Like, we wouldn't be talking right now, Cartwright. There's just no way. Even those first couple of years, our conversation would be very different than where we are now. But what started that day, because I made a commitment. After she asked that question, I made a commitment to myself, but also to them to go 1 year without drinking, just to prove that I could to myself.
Mm-hmm.
To show that, no, this isn't the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the problem, which I learned very quickly, because in that first 6 weeks, it got really real very quickly and really hard. And from the standpoint, that was my go-to for relieving stress and anxiety and overwhelm. I removed that entirely. And I'm like, what do I do to get rid of those feelings? Because they're still there, Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And because I removed that crutch, and because I was so committed and determined to go down this path, to make some changes, I got to a place where all I was left to do was to actually be fully honest and transparent with my wife, and actually share how I was feeling.
Yeah. Which is a muscle most men don't really exercise.
I hadn't exercised it, because I didn't know how, and I always felt sheepish about it. This idea of being vulnerable, huh? I'm like, my relationship with that word was, no, that's a weakness. Right. I can't be vulnerable. I don't cry. No, that's not a man. But that's what I believe, because it's also what I was told, and it was what was reinforced through the actions of the men that I was surrounding myself with. I just didn't know any better,
Yeah.
And after getting really open with her and sharing how overwhelmed I was and how hard it was, and just all my concerns and emotions about being a dad and feeling like I was failing at that, really just raw and real, the verbal dump, right?
Yeah.
But it was verbal, but it was all just pouring out from my heart. It really was. This is like me just telling her how I was feeling. And it was the first time in our 10 years at that point. We had been together already for 10 years. And my kids were at 6 and 4. And just something in her eyes that day, I felt heard.
Yeah.
But I also felt seen, really seen. And from that conversation, I expressed, I need some help with this. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So together, she supported me. I found a psychologist, and I started working with him for about 4 months. Found a relationship counselor for us both to go and get better at communications with each other, to be more open, to be able to talk about some of these more challenging conversations, because I didn't have the awareness on how to have the talk. How do I talk about my emotions in a way that doesn't make me feel, weak? Less than, can I do this in a way that still allows me to maintain that integrity of myself, and I noticed I just needed to learn that. And the funny thing was, with the relationship counselor, 2 sessions in, she's like, no, Christy, my wife's name, Christy, I think it's better if Dai comes on his own, So when a relationship counselor is like, no, we just need to work with you. It's okay. It's all right. Just to sort of put things in perspective. Right. And, but here's the thing. And this is what I want to leave anybody that's listening to this right now, because I'm not here to say, hey, look at me. This is what I've done. This is not my point of sharing this story. My point of sharing this story is listen, I get it. I know how lonely and scary it can be when we find ourselves in that position where we have to rely on exterior things, especially things that aren't good for our health, to just cope with the day-to-day. And I know it's awful. It's an awful place to be. It is scary. It is isolating. And it's a really hard place to be creative from, to create impact for others from.
Yeah.
And I know we all want that. We all want that. We want to help others. We do. As human beings, we like to help one another. We like to connect with each other. We like community. We do. But not when we don't like ourselves. So in that 1 year, so much changed for me. So much. I changed more in that 1 year than the previous 15 years.
Yeah.
We got to the end of the year, and it was hard. It was a lot of work, but it was also a lot of fun. Because all of a sudden I had all this extra energy. I had extra money. I had extra focus and time. Yeah. Because I wasn't hungover. I was just accomplishing a lot more. But I was also able to set goals, and I was actually able to reach those goals more quickly and efficiently because I didn't have any of the distractions side railing me anymore.
Right.
We got to the end of the year. My wife, I remember we're celebrating. We're like, my God, I just did a year without drinking. She's like, do you want to celebrate? You want to share a bottle of wine? And I'm like, Christy, I feel so good. And I'm looking back, and we're looking back on the year that was, and I'm like, I've accomplished so much in this last year. What if I just keep going? What could that look like?
Yeah.
And now I'm coming up on 13 years, 13 years. Like and everything's changed in 13 years, everything. And it keeps changing, and it's very dynamic. But I feel alive, and I feel connected to my life. And that is what I wish for every man out there.
Absolutely.
And every man deserves that.
Yeah.
And if we're lacking that, please know that there is always a way, but you may need to just be able to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the most challenging aspect as a man, is being able to humble ourselves enough to say to somebody enough that I need some help.
Yeah. So that was what I was wanting to ask you, Dai. I'm kind of curious in the moment, because I people that like you have gone on this journey. They've leaned into it and said, "This, I'm going to embrace the discomfort." And so, what was when it was hard? How did you talk to yourself? What was the self-talk to really keep going? Because it could easily, like, man, I could just bail out. I know the easy way out here.
Well, first of all, what I had to remind him, sort of what I also shared with you before about me being morbidly obese as a teen. Like I'm not a stranger to big change.
Yeah.
I went through a big physical change. Notice I said physical, okay? Because that's all I was focused on. I was like, I don't want to be like this anymore. I was overweight. I was unhealthy. And it was only because I didn't move my body very much. I played a lot of video games, watched a lot of movies, and I ate food, a lot of food, but not healthy food, okay? Like very calorie rich, nutrition poor.
Right.
And, do that for 5 years. And obviously we're going to see some negative changes. And I was really depressed, very withdrawn. I was isolated because I was already someone that deals with social anxiety. And, you add on top of that morbid obesity, it's like, it's a double whammy, and life was challenging. But when I got to that place and I made a commitment to change for me, not for anybody else, but for me, and I just started to take a little bit of action every day, just a little bit, right? I just moved my body a little bit every day. And I changed what I was putting in my mouth every day.
Yeah.
Like that is it. Like I'm trying to overly simplify this because that was just what I did. But here's the magic. I repeated every day. Okay. Like it wasn't like I did it once and it was like, oh, it didn't work. Oh, well, I might as well give up. No, I just committed to a process or a path. And I repeated. But there was 3 questions that I had to answer. And so bringing this back to when I started to go through this same sort of change with the alcohol, and then a couple of years after that, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. It's chronic. I live with it all the time. My hematologist jokes, but during COVID, she's like, it's probably better if you just live in a bubble.
Yeah.
Because I'm highly susceptible to viral infections. I don't have any defense. So just, again, I'm putting this into perspective because listen, people, they meet me and they see how healthy I am and how I live my life. And they just presume, oh, you're super fit and you're healthy because of that. I'm like, no, I do this because I don't want my condition to come and get me, if you know what I mean. A lot of us have autoimmune challenges, but it's our lifestyle that dictates whether or not that shows up and affects us. And so I make certain choices. So all this being said, there's 3 questions. All right. And I want to impart these 3 questions for anybody that's listening to this, because if you get good at answering these questions, you'll always be able to navigate change, no matter how challenging it may look. The first question, can I do it?
Yeah.
Can I actually do the thing I want to change? Like I think back to myself as a morbidly obese teenager at 15 years old. Can I actually get healthy? Can I get healthy? Really? At 15, I've got all that life experience, right? I'm like 5 of those 15 years, literally over a third of my life was spent in that unhealthy state. You can imagine where my belief systems were. You talk about the self-talk. Yeah, the self-talk was extremely negative. Fat, nobody likes you. No one loves you. Nobody wants you.
Right.
That was how I felt.
Right.
And I believe that to be 100% true.
Yeah.
Because it was true to me. And it's a hard place to be, right? Like if we don't feel value, I mean, forget about it. It's it's tough. Like we're not going anywhere, you know?
Yeah. Even if you're super fit, right?
Yeah.
You could still, if you still have that self-belief, it's not going to change. Yeah.
And lots of us, we mask things, right? And we get really good at that. And so where I was going, with all this is these 3 questions. I had to ask the question, can I do this? And what I realized in asking that question of ourselves, can I do this change? So whatever the change is that you're thinking of. So anybody listening to this, it's like, think about that change that you're identifying that you'd like to make. Mm-hmm. And we know we're ready to make a change. Mm-hmm. We just do. You know, when we're more afraid of staying as things are, the status quo of our life versus the idea of things changing, you know, when we're afraid of the status quo, then come on, it's time to wake up and do something. You know, like that's just how I like to put it, just blankly. You know, it's like, okay, you're ready. You know, you're ready to do something.
Right.
So answer these questions. You know, can I do this? It's going to identify, I don't know enough to make a commitment or a decision. And so it's education. That's usually all that you need for question 1. I got to learn a bit more.
Yeah.
So I can get clear and confident that if I start to take an action, it's actually going to bring me towards the result that I want to see created for myself or the change I want to see.
Yeah.
So can I do this? Yeah. You know what? I can. You know, at 15, I went to the library. My kids are still like, Dad, why don't you just Google it? I'm like, your dad's older than Google. Like, hello. Right. Like, and obviously they're really snide remarks after the fact, but we won't go there. But, you know, so I went to the library. I got books on fitness and nutrition. Mm-hmm. And guess what I did? And I read those books, educated myself, because then I got clear on what I could start doing that was different than what I was doing. And I just knew that was a different path that would take me to a different result. Yeah. And the only reason why I believed that was because I answered question 2 afterwards. So question 1, can I do this? Question 2, if I do this, will it work? So for me, it was like, okay, well, if I start to change how I eat, I start to move my body a bit more, like exercise specifically. Yeah. Will I start to see some improvement, some changes that I want to make? And this is what's really cool is today, man, we have podcasts like yours. We have platforms out there that have amazing stories of people that have endured through terrible suffering and have come out the other side changed and often stronger than they were because of that experience, you know? But it's social proof that, wow, if somebody else did it. Yeah. You know, if they did it, why can't I? Mm-hmm. Because it's a lot easier to answer question 2. Well, if I do this, will it work? It's like, well, that person did it. It worked for them. That person did it. Worked for them. That person did it. Worked for them. Well, I know it's going to work for me too. Yeah. So can I do this? Yeah. I'm educated. I know what I need to do. Yes, I can do that. Yeah. I can eat a little bit different. I can move my body a bit more. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can stop drinking alcohol for a year. No problem. I can do that. Okay. If I do that, will it work? Okay. Will I see my life improve if I give up alcohol for a year? I mean, when I made the commitment, could I have said, yeah, absolutely? Because I wasn't feeling that way. Okay. Like, I'm just being honest. Like when I made the commitment, I wasn't thinking yes to number 2. You know, if I do this, will it work? I wasn't thinking, oh, by giving up alcohol, my life's all of a sudden going to get better. I hoped that. I didn't really know it until later on in the journey. So sometimes we have to make the commitment and just go for it and believe that by doing that, good things will start to happen. Yeah. And usually they do. But you have to be committed to repeating to be able to create that positive momentum so you can see the positive stuff start to happen. A lot of people, you know, like I look at New Year's resolutions, right? It's like New Year's Day, I'm going to get fit. I'm going to get healthy. And statistically speaking, by January 21st, 3 weeks into January, over 50% of people that have committed to a healthy resolution have already given up. That's awful, right? I mean, that sucks. I mean, that just tells me people are used to failing. Yeah. And are already expecting to fail even when they set a goal. Mm-hmm. And that sucks. You know, like that's not a good thing. So if I do this, will it work? Yes. We get to that place where you can say yes. Question 3. This one's the tough one. Yeah. This is the one that I struggled with. And I'll be honest, I still struggle with sometimes. And I think we all do. Is it worth it? Now, when I'm talking to teams or organizations, I can use the term it, you know, is it worth it? Is the change worth it? But when I'm talking to people like you and I, you know, you're looking at another man or there's somebody listening to this right now. My question to you is, are you worth it? Or more importantly, can you ask this of yourself? Am I worth it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's not an easy question to answer.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us don't feel like we have value. Like we have that belief around us already that's saying, no, I don't know if I am worth it. And if we're feeling like that, because this ties in, and sorry, this is that long about way of answering your question about the self-talk, because this is what I think a lot of people are feeling is one of the self-talks is like, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
It's around the value piece.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't think we're enough, why put the investment of time to make the change?
Yeah.
Because we don't think it's worth it. I'm not worth it. And it's a really hard place to be. And that's why there is actually technically a 3-point, that we'll call that 3A. Now there's a 3B. So if you're struggling with answering that question, am I worth it?
Yeah.
You can't say, hell yeah, I'm worth it. If you can't say that right away, find a community to belong with.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, who do I need to surround myself with to help me accomplish these changes I want to make? Because they will have enough belief, because they're just further along on the same journey, that they can drip into us that don't have the belief in ourselves yet. They give us that belief until we have it for ourselves. And the cool thing is, once we have it for ourselves, well, now it's our turn.
Yeah.
Because to keep the change and to keep you on the path that you've now committed to making your own life better, as well as the people of everyone around you is going to benefit too, it's now paying it forward.
Yeah.
You go from being the hero of your story to now being a guide or a mentor to somebody else on their story.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's really where my life has gone this last 10 years. Those first few years is really just focusing all on me, trying to improve myself, my situation, to help my family. But then it got to a place where I'm like, I felt drawn to now help others with the same sort of change.
Yeah.
And that's, oh man, does that light me up? Yeah, it does. Yeah. Does it make me feel fulfilled? Yeah. Does it make me feel happy? Yeah. And I love it because it makes me feel like I'm providing value, and it makes me feel of value.
Yeah.
And we all have access to this. We all do, So anyways, those are those questions I want to throw at you.
That's good. I mean, I really, as I sit there and just look at you and listen to you, you do have a cup overflowing type mentality, right?
Didn't always.
Thing's full and I got to give it away because it's right.
Thank you. That's it's a choice, right? And but all of us, I think, get to that place. Like you're doing that exactly with your platform, with the content you're putting out, the space that you're creating is the exact same thing. You saw a need for yourself, right? You start to help yourself, but then there comes a point where you're like, you know what? I want to help others with this because it also in turn continues to help you with it too.
Yeah,
and it just gives us purpose, meaning. Which ties into fulfillment. And, there's Joseph Campbell, and he's the one that coined the term, the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And, we all have these journeys that we're on, and they're beautiful. And I know that's what you highlight. You're highlighting people's stories, their journeys, right? And we can all see ourselves in other people's journeys.
Yeah.
And we can learn through that. But his whole thing, and this question that he would often ask people is, are you following your bliss?
Yeah.
Are you following your bliss? And when he asks, what do you mean by that? He means, are you choosing to live a life that allows you to experience as much happiness, joy, and fulfillment that you're capable of achieving, or experiencing? Like, are you choosing to follow or create a life that allows you to have more happiness, joy, and fulfillment? And if the answer is no, it's like, well, would you like to change that? Would you like to see that become more of your life? Would you like to follow your bliss with your journey?
That's good.
And that's a great way to sort of start, it's like, am I following my bliss? Well, no, there's this I'd like to change. This I'd like to change. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you just identified a couple of things you'd like to change and improve on. Well, let's start there. You know?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So Dai, I really love to hear more of how you take all of that, what you've just shared. How do you engage that and use health and fitness and wellness in what you do on a day and really help people do that, all of everything that you've said? How do you use this industry to do that?
Well, fitness is interesting because it is one of the few things that ties into almost every other aspect of our life. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, fitness ties into all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to invite people, what is the one thing that you can do that by doing it makes everything else either easier or obsolete? and I didn't coin that question. I forget his name, but it's called The One Thing is the name of this book. And I'm drawing a blank right now for the author, but regardless, that's the question that he really prefaces, what is the one thing that by doing that one thing, it makes everything else in life a little bit easier, or maybe it makes a lot of the other things that you normally would be doing not required anymore.
Yeah.
I find that fitness is one of those pieces that makes us feel good, but it also helps our mind, our mental health very closely, And so I invite people to engage in just being more physically active every single day. And I'm not saying go to the gym and pound out a CrossFit workout every day. That's the surest way to burn yourself out. But it's good to move your body every day with purpose, create a little bit of a positive adaptation, meaning that we get the heart rate elevated and we keep it elevated for a certain period of time. We push around a load that's more than just our body weight. Why? Because it's additional resistance and it does produce a positive adaptation. Because here's the thing, everybody, and you're going to love this. Stress, it's considered like the epidemic of our generation is chronic stress and a lot of the complications it creates. But on the flip side, one of the best ways to also improve our lives is through stress. And people are like, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, working out is stress.
Yeah.
You're putting the body through stress, but it's controlled stress. And it's stress that creates a positive change, a shift hormonally, right down to our blood sugar, right down to our body's composition of fat to lean muscle mass. And all these things as we age, if we're not looking after it, believe me, you don't use it, you will lose it. That adage, as much as it's a cliche, is true. This also goes with our mental acuity, just keeping our mind sharp. There's lots of things we can do, but we know that by working out, it makes a lot of everything else a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And so that's where I always like to engage people first is just start moving every day. If that means getting out for a 30-minute walk every day, that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
And if they say, well, I don't really have 30 minutes. Okay, do you have 15 minutes? Because 15 minutes, think about it, that's only 1% of every 24 hours. 1% of your day going to your own physical well-being.
Yes. It's so good. Yeah.
Like, it's not very much. It's like, you don't have that? And they're like, well, because I have people, they're like, I just don't know if I have that time. And I'm like, well, and there's a sort of this is a paraphrased version of it, but there is that sort of saying that, well, if you don't make time for your health, you might as well take time for illness.
Ooh.
And it may not be on the immediate. This is why I always joke. It's like, a lot of people eat fast food. Right? And believe me, there's been periods of my life I've eaten a lot of fast food. It's convenient and it tastes good. It's been engineered to taste a certain way. It's engineered and it provides us a very instant dopamine, serotonin, as well as a blood sugar lift. And it makes us feel good.
Yeah.
Until it doesn't, right? And could you imagine if every time you went into a fast food place and you ordered that fast food meal, if you put on like 5 pounds as soon as you ate it? Like if that response happened right away, or all of a sudden we're like, one Big Mac and I had a heart attack, like, would we take the risk? Would we do it? Well, no, of course not. We wouldn't, but it doesn't happen that way. Change is gradual. And that works both positively, but also on the negative.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's it. I mean, that's really the gist of it. That's where I want to invite people to start. I have a book called The Whole Life Fitness Manifesto. If people are stuck on how to do this and they need help with getting clear on the why, great book. Digital copies are free on my website. If they want a printed copy, I can't give it away for free, but you can pick them up at Barnes & Noble or Amazon. In Canada, at the local bookstore here is called Chapsters, and they have it as well. But, outside of that, just go to my website. I got so much content, 1,500 articles. I'm an OG in the blogging space. I've been doing it for 15 years. There's articles there to help you live your best life and get out of your own way. Start there. Reach out to me on social. I'm very active. You can type my name in. You'll find me on social media. And let's have a conversation, because listen, I'm happy to help if I can.
Yeah. And I'll say, there's great stuff on your website. I already downloaded your 5-day sugar detox. So.
Oh, beauty. There we go. Nice. How's that going?
It's not easy. I'll say that.
But that's another one. Actually, thank you for bringing that up, Cartwright. And I know we're getting on to the time here, but the sugar piece, like if people are looking for help with that, I know that that's on the nutritional side. So fitness is one thing, get your body moving. Mm-hmm. It's going to help everything. I don't want to go through it all, but just believe me, trust me. Mm-hmm. Just walk outside 30 minutes a day for 30 days. Tell me that your life didn't get better.
Yeah.
I challenge anybody to do that and come back to me after 30 days and tell me things didn't improve.
Yeah.
Because I know it will.
Yeah.
But nutritionally, if you cut sugar out, even if people cut back 80% of their sugar intake, just 80%, I'm not saying get rid of it entirely, but 80%, if you got rid of 80% of the sugar that you eat and only got it in its true sources, like through fruit and other types of natural sources, like you still get sugar. Sugar is not a bad thing, but too much of it obviously creates a bit of a challenge. Yeah. But that sugar detox is a great way to start. And if you did that nutritionally, holy smokes, does that make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like huge. Huge.
So I need to let you go, but I will.
I know. Yeah.
With if you could, a couple of sentences or less. I know it might be hard for you, right?
No. Okay. I'll try.
Okay. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
Well, I'm going to riff a page from Buddha's book. Okay. And I'm not a Buddhist, but I do appreciate some of the teachings from Buddha. Mm-hmm. And, he's often a lot of us have heard this term or this quote, or at least the paraphrased version of it, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. Right. And what he was referring to is it doesn't matter how challenging a situation you find yourself. Don't worry. Mm-hmm. You'll get through this. We can weather the storm and we can get out the other side because we are naturally resilient as people. Yeah, we do. We can endure hard stuff. Mm-hmm. And we come out the other side changed. Yeah. And life continues to go on. So this too shall pass. But here's the thing, and this is where I want to leave it, because at my 25-year-old self, this would have been really helpful, very helpful. He wasn't just talking about the hard stuff. He was also very much so talking about all the good stuff in our life. Because this too shall pass. Yeah. And it's that reminder to be fully present and engaged with your own life right now. Not tomorrow, not yesterday, but right now, because now is all that we actually have, is where everything happens. Yeah. So you know what? Yeah, this too shall pass. That first kiss you have with that significant other, the first time you see your child smile or laugh or giggle or take their first step, and the first time you got that promotion at work, like that too will pass. Enjoy it for what it was. Yeah, that's good. But remember, it will pass. Mm-hmm. That's so that's it. That's all I got. Yeah.
Dai, I appreciate it, man. That was great. Man, you are a fire hose, so you gave it all.
I know. Sorry, man. It is. It's like
no, all quality, man. So thanks for coming on. It was a blast.
Cartwright, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I have a feeling we'll have follow-up conversations, and I'm just looking forward to following along and seeing more of the impact that you continue to make. And please know that if I could support with anything, just ask anytime. Because people that are listening to this, you're in the right place right now. This is perfect. This is great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Cartwright.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Men Are Forged podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I recommend going to episode 95, my interview with Greg Oliver. It's a great story of addiction as well. This is a similar topics that I hit on with this episode, but I highly recommend go check out episode 95 with Greg Oliver to help you really start pursuing your highest quality of life and address those things in your life and answer those hard questions. So thank you for listening to the Men Are Forged podcast.